Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going on a really fascinating journey to uncover how our cozy, modern holiday traditions are actually rooted in some incredibly ancient and, quite frankly, slightly wild Norse rituals. We're going to dig into exactly how Yule fundamentally shaped the Christmas traditions that we all know, love, and practice today.
Right off the bat, I want you to take a second and just picture your living room in the middle of December. You probably have a giant chopped-down pine tree sitting right there next to your TV, right? Or maybe you're curled up watching movies about ghosts visiting grumpy old man in the middle of the night. Seriously, why do we drag evergreens inside and tell ghost stories? When you really stop and think about it, the traditions we blindly practice every single December are kind of bizarre.
Okay, let's dive into this. To truly understand our modern holidays, we really have to travel back in time to the celebration of Yuletide. Now, Yule was a Norse New Year's festival, but it wasn't just an excuse for a huge party. It was this profound, life-affirming celebration marking the end of the harsh, freezing darkness of winter and welcoming the triumphant return of the sun. For the ancient Norse, winter was literally a matter of life and death. The sun's return wasn't just, a nice change in the weather. It meant survival. It meant crops were actually going to grow again. So Yule became this absolutely critical time for deep reflection upon the past, evaluating what you'd done over the year that was ending, and making a really firm resolve to do better in the days ahead.
Part 1. The World Tree and Logs, Bringing the Forest Indoors.
So this brings us to our first major connection. When the ancient Norse brought an evergreen tree inside, it absolutely wasn't just for decoration or, to make the mead hall smell like pine. The evergreen tree actually represented Yggdrasil, the massive, mythic Norse world tree that connected the heavens, the earthly realm, and the underworld. Just imagine the stark contrast for a second. Outside, the landscape is dead, barren, and frozen solid under feet of snow. But inside you have this vibrant, living evergreen. It was a powerful, tangible symbol of the life force itself. It represented the unyielding hope of renewal and rebirth when the world outside seemed entirely devoid of life.
And this brilliantly illustrates how those ancient symbols evolved into what we have today. The Norse didn't just casually throw a log on the fire to warm up. It was a deeply symbolic, highly structured ritual. First, you burn the mighty Yule fire, offering light to pierce the absolute darkest time of the year. Second, and this is key, you deliberately save a piece of the wood from that fire. Finally, you use that exact saved piece to start next year's fire. This perfectly maps out the cyclical nature of life and continuity, showing exactly how the ancient roaring Norse bonfire evolved into the cozy, symbolic modern Yule log we know today.
Part 2. Odin, the First Santa, the All-Father's Yuletide Ride.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens when you compare the big man in red with the Norse god Odin. I mean, the conceptual similarities are absolutely undeniable. On one hand, we have our modern Santa. He flies through the winter sky, rocks a flowing white beard, and distributes gifts to the good. On the other hand, we have Odin, the king of the gods, also known as the All-Father. During Yuletide, Odin was believed to ride through the sky sporting his own long, flowing beard and distributing gifts to the deserving. The parallels are just incredible when you break down the mythology side by side like this.
Of course, there is one pretty structural difference in their preferred mode of transportation. Instead of a cute little team of 8 tiny reindeer pulling a sleigh, Odin flew through the sky on Sleipnir. And Sleipnir was a magical, fearsome flying horse with exactly 8 legs. I mean, just imagine looking up into the freezing winter sky and seeing an 8-legged horse galloping through the storm clouds. It's a rather bizarre, imposing contrast to our modern Christmas Eve tales, isn't it?
Part 3. The Wild Hunt and Ghosts, Spooky Tales for the Holidays.
Speaking of looking up into the winter sky, the holidays weren't all just gifts and evergreens. There's a fantastic quote from our source material that says, "Ghosts were especially active during Yuletide and might bring harm or messages from the afterlife that could improve one's character." Does that sound familiar? Because it definitely should. When Charles Dickens published his famous work, A Christmas Carol, in December of 1843, he was tapping into a very old, deeply rooted vein. Those Victorian ghost stories of spirits trying to improve Ebenezer Scrooge's character, they actually owe a massive debt to Norse mythology and their ancient beliefs about the eerie, spirit-filled Yuletide season.
And this tradition of spooky tales builds into an even grander myth. You see, the Norse believed in something called the Wild Hunt. This was a terrifying, chaotic parade of spirits ripping across the winter sky, sometimes led by Odin himself. If you were unlucky enough to witness this medieval phenomenon, well, it gave you a stark, terrifying reminder of life's brevity and your own impending death. It wasn't just a scary campfire story. It was essentially the ultimate opportunity to radically change your ways and live a better, more honorable life. Just to avoid becoming an unwilling participant in that ghastly hunt.
Okay, let's step away from the spirits for a second and get back into the warmth of the dining hall. I want you to think about your own holiday menus. If we compare the traditional Yule feast with a traditional British Christmas meal, we find another amazing link. For the Norse, the total centerpiece of the Yule feast was a massive roast boar. This wasn't a random choice either. The boar was sacred to Frey, the Norse god of peace, prosperity, and a bountiful harvest, which is exactly what you'd pray for in the dead of winter. As centuries passed, the British tradition evolved this custom into a massive roast beef, which was later largely replaced by turkey. So while things like Christmas cake and Christmas pudding are thoroughly English inventions, that centerpiece holiday roast, it has a much, much older lineage.
Part 4. Fusing the traditions, how the old merged with the new. So, the crucial point is, how did all these distinct Norse rituals become the widespread Christmas traditions we know today? Well, as Christianity became more widespread throughout Scandinavia and Europe, the old religion didn't just vanish overnight. It rarely works that way in history, right? Instead, it seamlessly fused with the new beliefs to make the cultural transition a whole lot easier. We see this explicitly in the surviving elements we still practice: gift-giving, celebration through song, burning Yule logs, and decorating evergreen trees. We are literally still unknowingly practicing these ancient Norse traditions every single time we gather around the fire to celebrate the modern holidays.
It's truly incredible to see how beautifully history and culture are endlessly recycled. The cozy traditions you enjoy today with your family are the direct, undeniable echoes of ancient survival bonfires, mythological world trees, and an 8-legged horse galloping through the winter sky. Which leaves me with one final provocative question for you to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. As culture continues to shift, merge, and fuse over time, whose ancient traditions might you be celebrating hundreds of years from now? Keep questioning what you know, and keep learning.